So please welcome Mia Magik to the show. Welcome, Mia.
Thanks, love. So good to be here.
Oh gosh. And the setting that you're in and the the person you've been in my life for the last few days, listening to your book, IntuWitchin, um, listening to you and your voice, because I was listening to it on Audible, of course, but I'm walking outside, I do my walks in the morning with my dogs and I'm listening to you and I'm looking at the trees and I always have that. I look at birds and my podcast is called Uncover Your Magic, right? So
hmm
I know everything has magic, but you've taken that magic to an entirely different level. And
Mm.
I know in my life and all the magical moments are when I've been, taken the risk, done something out of my, comfort zone and really just went and listened to my intuition. And, starting this podcast 4 years ago, it was this voice that said, start a podcast. And I'm thinking, I'm 50 years old. Like who's going to have a listen to me, or who am I going to interview? But I take that step. But when you describe in your life where you've heard that voice and you started to move forward like and see the magic in every single thing, and I love it. And you've done something to me. I told you before we hit record, I started getting emotional after I ended your book, probably because you've been part of my life. So it was like, oh shoot, she's done. Like
Mm.
I don't want to say goodbye, but
Mm.
looking forward to seeing you. And but what I was wanting for you to start with, because I want people to understand, you didn't just you did wake up and you were who you are today, but you had to go through your, like we all have to go through our um little lessons in life journey before we get to where we're really meant to be. But will you go through, because I know you were raised in Northern California, and I feel like we could talk about when you were 16, but where do you want to start with, and how, where can we start with what people can understand kind of your background, childhood?
No, I'm finishing up this chapter in the second book right now about my path, and the second book is called Ritual, and so it's all about relationship to ritual and my tradition, my cultural background, not having a lot of religion growing up, was fantasy and fairy tales and stories. And I think that one of the best things, I've done so many podcasts recently and personal branding and authenticity and how to find your magic and all of these different threads that I feel like really the place where they're unified, where they become one, is in following the dreams or the fantasies or the desires of our inner child. And not just our inner child, like who is the little being inside of us now when we are adults, but who we were as a 3, 5, 7, 10-year old. And I think that that is one, it's some of the greatest healing work that you can do, is to give that version of yourself what they need. I had a coaching session this morning where I was being coached, and she was just talking about this thread of the thought of I don't matter. And that was a big theme for me, and is still something that I deal with. And when I would read fairy tales, it was like everything in life mattered. The animals mattered, the path that you took mattered, the little synchronicities mattered, the power that you have, whatever your unique magic that you were meant to uncover, it all mattered. And so I just felt this greater significance in life, in my stories. And when I would look around at the world surrounding me, it didn't feel very magical, and it didn't feel very significant, or the things that felt significant were like things I didn't agree with, or they didn't feel right to me. And so I think that my journey really began with, one, wanting to make my life matter, wanting to have a life that mattered.
Mm-hmm.
Two, realizing that where I found meaning and what I thought actually really mattered was stuff that I saw more often in my books than in my real life, like our power and our magic and our relationship to the natural world and to the wild and to the animals and to our own belief systems and to our own powers. And so I really started pursuing that type of meaning and wanting to matter in that way to myself. And then after many years of sleeping and many years of being totally unhappy and depressed and like all sorts of other things that were not pleasant or comfortable to experience or exist in, I really chose, okay, well, what matters to me now is fulfilling and honoring the needs and the dreams and the desires of that little girl who feels disappointment in the life that I'm leading now. She doesn't feel happy. She feels like I've forgotten what's important. And in some ways, she's right. And so I want to help heal that wound within her. And so that was really, it was really for me inner child work and desiring to reclaim the connection to the fantasies that I'd had as a little person. That was really what set me on the path that I'm on today. And like, you know, I couldn't have imagined being a professional witch as a little girl. And I didn't know that I had probably thought that I would write a book, but I didn't really think about it. You know,
Right.
it certainly I didn't think that it would be about actually making magic in your real life. And so, you know, just the idea of pursuing what my inner child hoped for and desired has actually granted me a life that is more than she could have even imagined. That
Mm-hmm.
it isn't just magic in stories and fairy tales; it's magic in my everyday experience, in many different ways. And so that's just such a gift.
Yes, I love that. At the end of your book, you were saying, "Thank you, Mom. She's my opposite."
Yeah,
How were you raised? But what do you mean? Because I look at you as a child, like, doing your fairy tales, making up, playing make believe, doing all the things. Because we could be creative in our life before we had all this technology. I mean, I raised two children with,
yeah,
and thinking, oh my gosh, I used to make forts and we'd be outside and we'd play all these
totally.
games. But my mom was like that creative person. But when I was picturing you, and then you said, she's my opposite.
Yeah.
Why?
She is very emotionally reserved. I've never seen her shed a tear in my whole life,
Oh,
except like
wow.
sad movies. They'll well up, but they don't ever like cascade down. So her eyes well up, but they don't, not a tear falls. She's very, which like she doesn't operate in terms of like emotional repression, but that is what has happened. She was traumatized as a child. She was in a really horrible accident. She, like I was, but younger. She lost her eye. Her older brother accidentally shot her in the eye with a bow and arrow. And
Oh my gosh.
I know, so crazy. And she was in the hospital, you know, like in the 50s. And it was scary. And she was having nightmares. And she came home and her dad like worked a 9 to 5 job. And she came home and she would have these nightmares. And one night she's crying and her dad screamed, like, I can't fucking listen to this anymore. And, or I can't take this crying anymore, something like that. And she never cried again
Wow.
from 4 years old from a severely traumatizing incident. So we're opposite in our emotional expression. She's she is very, I definitely get like my travel and adventure. I get that from both of my parents, but she's a Sagittarius. She is literally my opposite in astrology. She's a Sagittarius. I'm a Gemini. And I think that it's just in terms of, you know, now we are very similar in a lot of ways, like in, you know, that I'm so committed to buying everything secondhand and being sustainable. And, you know, she raised us like that. And the gifts
Huh.
that she would give us at Christmas were like Heifer International gift certificates. So she'd be like, oh, Merry Christmas, sweetie. I got you a cow for a family in Kenya in your name. And you're like,
Oh,
thanks, Mom.
you
Merry
did?
Christmas. You know, like,
So you did get that from her.
oh,
Okay.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I got
Okay.
so many things, so many of the good things that I got from her, but just in the way that we function in like our outward and external personality, we are totally different. And particularly in our emotional reality and in our desire for personal growth. You know, she's a very, since that incident, I think like she just kind of lives at this, it's like in Buddhism, they call it santosha. It's contentment. It's like
Hmm.
she's content, you know,
Hmm.
she's just content and sort of like lives as we're like, I am riding
Right.
the waves of life every single day. Sometimes it's a roller coaster and like I like roller coasters, you know. So um that's really the way that we are very different. It's just in how we function and how we relate to life, but how we operate in relationship to philanthropy, conscious business. You know, my parents were conscious entrepreneurs before that was like really even a thing,
Hmm.
you know, so that was a really, they were kind of trailblazing. They were trailblazing in the, you know, 80s and 90s, and had books, you know, they were in books when
Oh,
that was first
wow.
becoming a topic. Yeah,
Hmm.
they invented roof racks. My parents started Yakima, the roof rack company.
Oh
So
my gosh.
yeah, so they sold it and they don't own it anymore, which is why it's changed a lot. But it used to be like the company. And
Right.
so yeah, so there we are very, very similar, but it's just in sort of the emotions and in terms of understanding one another, we are
Hmm.
totally opposite, because we function so differently that we yeah, but she always loved me. You know, she didn't know how to deal with my emotions, and I was always like overwhelming and kind of big for her, but she never made that something bad. It was just something that she didn't always know how to handle.
But you know, you talk about how your dad, when you were a singer when you were little, and he said by just like you were being loud, and he
Yeah.
kind of did what her
Yeah,
what happened to
totally.
her.
Yeah.
And then you had your accident and she had her terrible. I mean,
Yeah.
like, isn't the way the mirror, like why is that? Have you
Girl.
looked at that?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's all so fractal. I actually did a really interesting Temescal Mayan sweat lodge ceremony in Mexico a few months ago, and I don't really associate my mom with like the work that I have to do, because I have like daddy issues. You know, I'm like, oh no, like me and my mom are good. We didn't, you know, we're great. We travel together. We're fine. And in this ceremony, everyone was sobbing like the moment that it started. And I was like, I'm great. You know, I sit in my sauna. I'm fine. This isn't too hot. I'm living my life. I'm sweating. I'm getting the benefits. Let's go. And then I've never had anyone, and it was run by all abuelas. It was like all grandmothers, women, full female run. The attendees were co-ed, but female run sweat ceremony. And she told us to lay down and return to our mother's womb and go into our maternal lineage. And when I did that, and I saw, you know, also when your ovaries form, when you are a fetus, all of your eggs form with them. So
Right.
when my mom formed inside of my grandmother, I was inside, I as an
Right.
egg was inside of her. So I went into this whole process, and her wounding and her issue with her dad, and my issue with my accident, and me having, and hers is her left eye and mine is my left
Oh,
arm.
wow.
And so this like feminine wounding, and really choosing this pat, and being wounded by the father who's supposed to protect us and supposed to hold us and supposed to take care of us. In my case, my dad was my biggest fan, and then he lets out this, you know, one statement of like, basically, shut up, I don't want to listen to you. And it changed the entire trajectory of my life.
Right.
And I went in and I held her and I talked to her and I told her how, so sweet. I told her how she cared for me. I
Hmm.
showed her, I like imagined her as this little 4 year old with her big eye patch and her little baby doll. And I was like, you know, when I'm that baby doll, I am your baby. And she always called me baby doll. That was like always what she called
Oh,
me, or doll
cute.
face. And I was like, that's me. Like, I am your, it's like makes me so emotional thinking about it. Like, I'm your baby doll. And when I got hurt, you took care of me every day. And when I
Yeah.
was hurt, you were always there, and you never yelled at me, and you were so patient with me, and you were so nurturing, and you were everything that I needed. And I got to like show her that. And then I held her in my arms, and I, you know, her dad had just come back from World War II. He was a bomber pilot. So he's like dropping bombs on people. And I got to tell her about all of this and talk to her about how her father had watched his brethren die, and some of them died in his arms. And like, I just told her this whole story, and it was so healing. And, you know, then I like go to tell my actual mom about it. She's like, oh, that's so interesting, honey. You know, and like, it's like, okay. And that's where
So
the
funny.
like mirror is different. You know, it's not something that she thinks about or spends a lot of time processing, and that's okay. Like, that's her thing. And I know that I am the one walking this forward. And even my dad, I'm in the process, a new dear sister of mine that I've known for a while, but we're like, I feel like we should be best friends. And so we're like on this best friend journey. So we're
Oh,
talking
cute.
yesterday about our trauma. She's like, so what's your trauma? And I was like, and then I finished and I was like, so what's your trauma? She's like, oh, this is such a great best friend conversation. I was like, yeah, I know. And and one of the things that I was talking about is how my dad was abused as a child and really raged at, and like, and he intentionally said, I want to make sure that my children know that they're loved, but he still really raged at us. Like the rage passed on, even though he was aware, he wouldn't have called it ancestral karma or, like like generational trauma, but it was. And he knew at the very least that he wanted to change some of those patterns and habits. And now I'm, for the sake of my lineage on both sides, I'm doing all of the work on all of the lack of emotions, the over emoting, the, everything that I can, I'm taking as my fuel and as my motivation and my opportunity to become the best version of myself that I can be. And, I just have more tools than my parents did.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I love the story of when your boyfriend took you to New York, and that Mia, like, it's interesting that you had to go do that. When I think of who you are and how you lived in the concrete jungle. But where is your perspective? Explain to people, like, because I look at my life and I love looking at from the higher perspective. I'm 55 years old, and yeah, I didn't get married till I was 35, 36, so I had this long journey of discovering and living in my masculine a lot because I
Mm,
was on my own. And
mm.
but it's so interesting when I look at the turns and the choices that I made to get me to like for you to have you meet this guy and go to New York and live there and have your outdoor, which I know how important nature is and how you view it now, be on the top floor of your apartment.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, I actually moved to New York 10 days out of high school. So I was there. We met there.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
right. He moved you back. That's right.
he moved me back to LA. Yeah.
Right.
God bless him. Yes. And, yeah, it was a very interesting time. It was just, I was so dead asleep. I was so disconnected from what mattered to me and what was important. And I didn't know that nature was my greatest healer at that time. I had totally just disassociated from myself. After my accident, after hurting my arm when I was 16, I was disassociated from my body and my life for many years after that. I was so, yeah, just like mentally and emotionally fucked up and yeah, just, yeah, like
Huh.
dead inside basically. And I think that we all deal with trauma and grief and big changes in our life in different ways. And I needed that time, really, I think, to appreciate what I have now and what I do now. And every day, still, when I would be there, even with all the crazy shit that would happen, I would look up at those buildings and be like, oh my God, I can't believe I live here.
Huh.
And and then when I've gone back to New York, and it's just concrete everywhere. I'm literally like, oh my God, I can't believe I lived here.
Oh,
And
funny.
but yeah, I think that it's like you said, those turning points in our lives, and I had a long journey too. Like I had a very, I love to say like, oh yeah, if I could go back and just have had my spiritual awakening, 5 or 10 years earlier, and be like some of my sisters who were priestesses at 14 and like had a shamanic mom who raised them and got to do this whole beautiful life and deal with high school by reading books about Mary Magdalene and stuff. Like, yeah, that would have been great.
Right.
um but I'm in the same boat, and I'm actually, in my 30s. My partner of almost 5 years and I are uncoupling, and it's a crazy thing, to like go against what society tells you. Oh God, it's too late, and oh, you need to, you should have already been married and had babies by now, and all of this stuff. And it's just like, no, actually, there's someone even better aligned for me. And I love this person so much. And we've had an amazing chapter and we're best friends. But like, there is deeper love, there is greater love, there is someone who is more capable of, yeah, like holding someone whose light and life and power and love and sexuality is as big as mine. And I'm excited about that, you know? And I've learned so much in this process that like I didn't learn. It's not that I didn't learn anything in the relationship, but I didn't learn in the relationship the things that I'm learning from the uncoupling process and the things
Yeah.
that I'm learning about myself and the things that are, again, further roadmap moments for growth and healing and opportunities for me to change and transform and rise like a phoenix reborn from the ashes and become an even more powerful magical version of myself. So I just think that, you know, everything happens as it should. And one of the things that I was talking about with one of my coaches this morning is like, you know, we can do the, I could have like, oh, I could have had my spiritual awakening earlier. Oh, I could have, you know, chosen something differently in this particular moment in our relationship. Oh, I could have done this or that or whatever it is. And yes, you could have, but what's so interesting and fascinating, I'm literally, wow, I just looked up and there's literally a bird laying an egg in her
Oh
nest
my
right now, like
gosh.
on the side of the house
I
as I'm
love it.
talking about this. So great. We're like birthing it all into existence.
Yep.
Um, we could have done things differently, but in our holographic experience of reality, which if you study quantum physics, if you know about the nature of like the double slit experiment and how electrons form through observation and like what happens in life, I'm the only one here. Everything and everyone is part of my hologram. The same as in your reality, you're the only one here and everything's part of your hologram. And the same thing in my partner's reality, where everything is just a hologram and he's the only one there. And so he doesn't even actually really exist. He played the role in my
Yes.
movie and in my
Yes.
reality that he was meant to play, so that at this point in my journey as the heroine of my story, I get to have the experience that I'm having now. And, you know, that makes a lot of like, oh, but then they don't matter. And like our cats and our love and our children and our money and like, you know, none of it matters. It's like, no, it all matters, but it's all us.
Right.
And so
I
I
love
think that
that.
that's really like what we have to face and what we have to own and what we have to take responsibility for. And it actually gives us an opportunity to take more responsibility, because then it's not even him or them or it's all me. So I get to look at every single aspect of the reflection that I am being given in the moment. And that's how I make my new choices moving forward. That's how
Right.
I build the next iterations of myself and how I blossom into the next version of who I'm meant to be.
Oh, mic drop big time. I loved that because I even parent like that. I look at my girls
Yeah, I
like
love it.
you know, with Richard, it's always like, huh, that is, you know, it's all a reflection of me.
Yeah.
What are they teaching me? What am I learning about myself? And you know, it's just such a powerful way if you really could understand that, what the healing part of just
Yeah.
even going through the uncoupling of what you say, because I've been listening to you like rave about this man, right? So this is new to me.
Yeah.
So when I'm listening to you rave about him, but look what you learned from that, you know,
Yeah.
and it's so powerful to have that um, just that human experience to have your soul go through that growth and then say, okay, that was for now. That was what taught me here. And then I'm going to move on because there's something better.
Yeah. And that's
Right.
what's weird about books. I mean, even like I've been writing the second one and we're already in the phase where like we don't have time to edit the second one. So like the first, you know, that book went in like in January of 2023, like the manuscript went in. So like it didn't come out for a whole year after. And yes, we were still together and now it's 2024 and my whole second book is already done and we're just now uncoupling. And so like even the
Oh,
second book is going to come out and we're still together. That's kind of the nature of publishing, you know?
right.
So
Totally.
yeah. So when the third one comes out, we'll have new stories to tell.
Oh, love it. let's talk about, you talk about abundance, you teach wealth, you teach witchy rich, which I thought was so, you're the words that you use are so creative. I love it.
Thank you.
But will you explain, because I know when you were had nothing and your friend told you to get the candle and do that whole thing, that
Mm.
but there's something about nature, and when you view nature, and it's like when I was listening to you this morning, I was walking and must have been talking about the flowers and the leaves, and then there's a moment in our life where there's no leaves on that tree.
Yep.
And that, scary, but they're going to come back.
Yeah.
It's just like when you look at abundance like that and the way you do and the way you teach. But will you go on that one?
Yeah, of course. So really, because, and it's so nice that I'm sitting outside and getting to look just down at these verdant fields of mustard flowers and apple trees and oaks and manzanita and pink peppercorn, and the wind is rustling to say hello, thank you for seeing us. Spider webs and passion fruit vines. And this is the epitomic expression of abundance. The earth is abundance. The fact that even anything can survive in a desert is abundance, even in like the face of utmost scarcity. I think that something that's so interesting is that so much of the wealth, like quote unquote wealth, like really, really deep financial resources, which like is not the true nature of wealth. We've certainly learned that, with all these billionaires who are so unhappy and just like numbing themselves with drugs and some substances and mindless sex and porn and all the things, like that's not wealth, it's being wealthy. But
Right.
I think that wealth, most of it has come from the desecration of the earth, in the early 1800s and late 1800s and early 1900s. Timber, it was like, let's cut down all the trees and we're going to make millions, and they did. And then it's oil, and then it's fracking, and JD Rockefeller is like, and the Rockefellers are like one of the richest families on earth, and they like dug down into the center of the planet, and how many countless oil spills that have like destroyed oceans and animals and habitats and all these things. And so there's so many deep pockets of financial resource that came from extraction of the earth. And to me, that's the opposite of abundance. And that's why those people, they don't seem happy, and they don't seem to be like actually really healthy and fulfilled. And they usually die or have like this generational trauma and karma that isn't peaceful or fulfilled. Because when you are desecrating the earth, what people forget is that the earth is a reflection of our bodies. The way that we have bones and muscles, that is like the stones in the mountains and the mud, and then the hair is the trees and the plants, and then the rivers and creeks and streams inside of our bodies are the veins and the waters, and then we exchange the breath with the natural world. The plants and the trees and the algae in the seas are always making what we inhale, and then we make what they inhale, and that's just not an accident. It can't possibly be. It's a perfect design. And then we have electricity running through us, which is the same light, the fire, the sun. That's why we call what our neurons do when they're properly functioning firing. And so people forget, like, we're not taught about this. When we lived in indigenous societies, this was common knowledge. This was like obvious. This was everything that you knew, that you were made of the same elements as the planet, and therefore you are the planet and the planet is you. And so you always wanted to live in harmony with Mother Nature, because she was your mother. She was your shared mother that made all of you people and tribes members brothers and sisters. And so I think that I have experienced so much abundance, financially and otherwise, I believe, because of my reverent connection to the earth. And all of my friends, like, they tell me how much I inspire them the way that I relate to the earth. And I make them want to be better, and be better about composting, and better about recycling, and better about less plastic usage, and better about, making things themselves at home and buying secondhand. And that's all I can do, because I can make my choices in a certain way, and I hope to be able to positively impact other people making choices. Because one of the big problems that I see in the conscious community is like, okay, we talk about not being like against, we're, it's not, doesn't help to be against, but we are aware of the destruction caused by families like the Rockefellers and like some of these negatives. There's tons of other systems. That's just one, the oil. And once
Right.
they realized that they could turn oil into quote unquote medicine, it was the Rockefellers and their whole oil magnate thing that made natural medicine into quackery, when natural medicine was all we ever had. Plants were the only medicine that we've had on earth until the 1920s. And then when they discovered that you could turn oil into pressed pills, which is what pharmaceuticals are made out of, is petrochemicals. Literally, they're made out of oil.
Right.
That's when we stopped using natural medicine again, which was our only medicine for the entirety of our species. And that was because of a smear campaign paid for and propaganda that was, released by the Rockefellers. So the thing is that conscious people, spiritual people, have a duty and obligation to use the consciousness that we have to make the kinds of choices that are not just succumbing to the program and the shoulds and supposed to's of this capitalist consumerist society. Now, I'm a capitalist because I make money, but I'm not an extractive capitalist. I'm a regenerative capitalist. Everything that I'm doing is to serve the planet and the people. I had to pray to the trees when they refused to put my book on recycled paper. I was like, please, please, I want it to be on recycled paper. They're like, no, sorry, not going to happen. And so I had to tell the trees how sorry I was, like, I'm so sorry that I'm going to cause more of you to be cut down. That's not what I want. And the thing is that too many conscious people order everything from Amazon and just want like cheap shit the same way as everybody else. But if we're the only ones who know better and we're still making the same choices as all the muggles make, we're in trouble. And so I relate to abundance in a very different way than other people do, but it's really worked for me. And it looks like supporting my local farmers and eating really clean food that comes from people, mostly like people that I know. Like I talked Alex Freckers, like one of my farmers at the Calabasas or the Palisades Farmers Market. And like I'm buying my organic groceries from that guy. And every Sunday and sometimes every Saturday, he's there and he's actually standing there. And like it's his farm and it's his name on the Venmo,
Oh,
and
cool.
he's hooking me up with the arugula or the spinach or the fennel or the strawberries or whatever it is. And that is just so lost. Like we used to grow food together side by side. It was like, okay, you've got chickens, your neighbor's got apples, your other neighbor's got the wheat or the oats, and then the other neighbor's got the cows, and like you just shared, and that was how we functioned. And it's just not like that anymore. And so there's so many different systems. So it's the medical system, it's the food system, it's the education system, it's our societal, just tribal systems, like people living in apartments and not knowing their neighbors and, being so closed off from one another and not trusting each other. If there was a problem in a community back in the day, it would be like, oh, if this person is untrustworthy, then we're going to have a council as a group to see what needs to be done to help this person figure out why they're behaving in an untrustworthy way. And, we just don't do any of that anymore. And so I think that.
But do you feel like we're getting there? Do you feel like we're getting closer to going back to that way? Or do you think that's like,
Girl, I certainly hope so. Like it's really challenging for me to say, because in my community, absolutely. Like if somebody's acting up, like there's an intervention, or like we show up and we, and yeah, the winds of change.
yeah, I love that.
The winds of change are blowing for sure. And I do notice when I'm outside of my community what's still normal for other people, and the magic of just every day in my life and community is something that some people can't even dream of for their whole lives. And always with twigs, and literally I pulled like a giant bunch of twigs out of my hair right before we started. I was like, oh yep, twigs, of course.
Oh, funny.
So I think that abundance, the biggest thing is that people want money and they don't recognize that the reason they want money is for some feeling that they perceive the money will give them. Is that safety? Is it security? Is it status? Is it validation? Is it, to show off to other people? Like there's so many different things that we like want money for. And if you can strive to, there's a couple of like my kind of pillars of abundance. if you're doing it in a way that's actually in honor of the earth, if you're not extracting, if you're not like being consumptive, you know, like constantly buying things in order to fill some kind of void or hole. That's why everything I buy is secondhand. Like everything I'm wearing is secondhand, except for I got these from a guy who raises the beetles. These are natural beetle wings. And I got
Oh,
them from
wow.
a guy who raises the beetles in like his farm, and they help his compost pile, these jeweled beetles. And then when they die, which is like after only 2 weeks, he makes them into earrings, you know? So like,
Huh. You mean
still
those are
feel
those beetles
sustainable.
that fly around that are
Yeah.
blind that I just get so like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, you have them
Yeah.
on your earring. That's
So,
crazy. Okay.
you know, so I support artisans and craftspeople, but everything else I buy is secondhand, like cashmere, Lululemon, like everything I'm wearing, all secondhand. And even my hydro flask is secondhand.
Huh.
And, and I think that that is a way to show a commitment to the earth. Hey, like, I don't want there to be more plastic on you. I don't want more pollution on you. I don't like, I definitely don't support fast fashion. I'm like, everyone stop buying things from Shein, stop buying your clothes from Amazon. Like, I know the things cost more, but they'll last longer. And like these cashmere sweatpants that I always wear, the other day, I fixed a hole in them myself with a sewing needle and thread. And I was like, oh my God, look at me. Like, I was so proud of myself. And like my
Cute.
grandmother, who used to sew our clothes and our Halloween costumes and our blankets and all these things, would have been so proud of me, because it's such a bummer that she didn't ever get to teach me how to do that, or I wasn't
Right.
interested enough in learning that skill. And so I think that these are those pillars of abundance: is, can you stop consuming because you are aware that the reason often that we're consuming is because of a belief that we're unworthy, or that we need to have this thing to fulfill something within us, like this will make us good enough, this will make us pretty enough, this will get the girl or get the guy. Can you really look at the desire for financial resource? What do you want it to make you feel? And if that feeling is safety, stability, security, that's totally understandable. That is a baseline need in the hierarchy of needs. But
Right.
can you start to generate the feeling of safety within yourself day in and day out? And when are the moments that you don't feel that? And how can you touch in with your inner child and ask them what they need in order to provide that safety? And then you're already operating in the vibration of abundance, so that then like that financial resource can come to you. And speaking of the vibration of abundance, it's very important to acknowledge all the other things in our lives that are abundance. Like for me, my friends, and what I get to do with my friends, and the love and the beauty and the fun and the play. Like my, you know, new best friend and I yesterday, we like sat outside naked and tanned. I did a workout. She went and got a coffee. Then we like went to this cool butterfly day thing. We had this whole beautiful butterfly experience, and a butterfly landed on my eye and was
Huh.
sitting on my eye for like several minutes. It was so magical. And then we went out on this beautiful hike where there was this little baptism pool, and I like, you know, cried and purged and did a little healing on myself. And then we went back home, and just that's just like a normal, that's not even anything special or interesting kind of day at all. And it was just so beautiful and such a gorgeous, perfect expression of life, and exactly what I want to be doing. And seeing all the different ways that you have abundance, plenty, bounty, beauty, that is so important. That is so necessary. If you want to have financial resource, you better be grateful for everything that you've already got. And when people are like, oh, I'm so broke, I'm like, well, you're on a smartphone. Like, you're posting on Instagram, you have internet, you have a phone, you know, you have, and even just thinking about those things, like I just remember how much gratitude I had when I was broke. And, you know, the reason, something we talk about in Witchy Rich a lot, is the word appreciation is what we use to describe when investments grow. Oh, it's
Right.
appreciating. And so when we appreciate things, they grow. So when you appreciate your community, it grows. When you appreciate your sexuality, it grows. When you appreciate the money that you have, even if it's not very much, it grows. And so that's a really important factor. Is it's not just about gratitude, it's about acknowledgement, and it's about enjoyment, and it's about squeezing the juice out of the magic that you already have in your life. Because you can be like, oh, I'm thankful for my cell phone, and oh, I'm thankful. Like, yeah, okay, like you can say gratitude, but how do you live gratitude?
Right. I love that.
And
So
that's the
about
big
that.
thing for me about living secondhand and buying everything secondhand. And I always pee outside. Like I don't pee inside because I don't want to waste the water, you know, and I don't want people to flush the toilet in my house. I'm like, if you have to pee inside, don't flush the toilet. Like just wait, you know? And
I
because
heard you say that. I'm
yeah,
like, oh
because I
my
just
gosh.
want the water to be
Right.
safe. Like I believe that's also, water is so related to abundance, you know, um, like liquid assets, streams of income. Like we talk about cash flow. Like there's all these different words that we use related to water and money, but we toxify our water all the time, every single day. Like animals don't poop in water. They would never do that. That's why our dogs and cats try to drink out of the toilet, because they're like, wait, this is fresh water coming in here constantly, you know, and
Right.
people in third world countries would kill for that water. And so I think that it's very important also, when you are wanting to manifest abundance, to be aware of the waters and the waters within you, which are the emotions. Because if you're damming your emotions, and this is something that, you know, like my partner definitely experienced throughout our relationship, like he's damming his emotions. And so like he would have these like big deals and these big like money things, and he's like, oh, I'm gonna get all this money, and then the deal would fall through and it wouldn't happen, because like he wasn't letting his emotions flow. And so I think
Oh,
that's
so
another
good.
big piece, is like we all have to be aware, again, if we are nature, if we are the elements, if you're going to like keep the waters stagnant, whether in your emotions or in your cash flow, that energy is going to, you know, it's going to get a little murky. It's not going to be clear. It's not going to be free flowing, because like you got to break that dam and let it go. And so I think that that's a really important thing also for people, is like looking at how your emotions, your creativity, and your sexuality relate to your finances, what you believe about those things, where there's toxicity and where there's an opportunity for, yeah, release and current to flow.
How do you teach someone that?
It depends on what their issue is. You know, some people need to emote, some people need to regulate their emotions more. Like that's a big thing for me that I'm working on, is I notice that when I have authority, like it used to be with my dad. So my dad would yell at me and I would just start crying. And so whenever my partner and I would get into something, or even like right now, you know, as we're on this uncoupling process, there have been a lot of moments where like I'll just start crying, and I'm overwhelmed, I'm getting emotional, you know. And so that's been a big piece in this uncoupling process for me, is like I want to be really well regulated within myself. And so I have been being very aware of, when I start to feel the tears come, I'm like, okay, girl, it's all good, I got you. And now this is very different for me, but I'm a very emotive person, so I
Right.
actually need to like calm and tame the waters a little bit, because the thing is with too much water, a landscape can flood. So it's like
Right.
the perfect amount of water. So can I, in this situation, bring the perfect amount of my emotions without necessarily like the flooding rains? And for different people, it looks like different things. Some people, it's about never having spoken what they really truly feel. They don't feel comfortable to say what they mean. They don't feel safe. And so I work, so many of my one-on-one clients, it's about expression. It's about like, what do I need to do or feel in order to experience the safety that will allow me to express what I really think, or what I really mean, or what I really need, or what I really want. For some people, it's about removing the blocks in our sexuality. You know, some people are really sexually repressed, and that also leads to challenges with abundance and finance, because sexual energy is creative energy, and creative energy is what generates abundance. That's how the earth does it. She's creating and blossoming and growing and blooming all these plants and seeds and fruits and trees all the time. And so, you know, I do so many different practices, like in my retreats, which are my absolute favorite thing to share and do. And we have beautiful castles in Scotland and in France, and
Oh,
then we
I
do
love
a
that.
little more rustic experience as well. But at my retreats, we really work on creating safe spaces to release any emotion that may not have had an opportunity to be released before. So whether it's rage or sadness or joy and ecstasy and pleasure, we really run the gamut with different experiences in order to give people an opportunity to touch their lowest lows and their highest highs in a way that creates a lot of acceptance, so that then whatever that space is, that wherever the block was, or that dam, you know, to the emotions, is moved through, transcended, transformed, so that there's more space to then fill that block or wherever that stagnant energy was with fresh flowing movement of energy.
You know, when I was listening to you talk about, you know, you're remembering, you know, you're relating to it, this witch, right? This is your like thing. And, you know, I look back at I can see past lives where I wasn't a witch, but I was always being tormented I teach teenage mindset stuff, you know, all that stuff. And that kind of evolved through this podcast because of the way I've parented my kids. So everyone was struggling in 2020, and that's kind of blossomed. And I see where I'm drawn to that, right? And so I know that's part of my soul. But when I was listening to you and the story of the fox, oh my gosh. And where you're saying you were remembering that. And I was telling somebody yesterday about it because I was listening to the book on my way to my class. And I was saying, oh my gosh, I can't wait for you to hear Mia Magic. And I said, she's at this place in her book where she's cutting the skin off of a fox and carrying this dead animal. But I can't even drive on the freeway and look over it because I'm such an animal person. But will you explain how you don't even have to explain that if you don't want, but the remembering, the place where our soul finally starts to go, this is really where I am, because you're living your soul's purpose.
Yeah, I am.
I mean, to the exact, I mean, I can't, like perfection in your 30s, like that's amazing.
Yeah. So yeah, I saw a fox on the road, and I had found an owl on the road recently. A friend of mine, I was in the redwoods in like the sequoias, and was at this self-marriage ceremony with a bunch of women. And this sister had found an owl on the road, and she brought it up, and one wing was really like broken, and she gave us each a feather from that wing, and she kept one of the wings, and she was like gonna have it as a smudge wand. And I always saw it in her home after that, and it was so beautiful. And the next, like a couple months later or a year later, I found an owl on the road, and I like stopped, pulled over, found the owl, buried the rest of it, kept the wings. And it's so funny, my cat's favorite toy, like I could buy her all the toys, and all she wants to do is play with the owl feet. That's like, I have all these owl feet with their like talons and stuff. That's like her favorite toy. And so I pulled over and found this owl, and it was so beautiful to have the wings. And I did this gorgeous ceremony where I buried it. And then a few months later, I was at home in Northern California, and I saw a fox on the road, and it was not me, because I would have felt the same way. I was super vegetarian at that time. I was like, I don't want to touch a dead animal. I'm not, but it wasn't, you know, it was already dead. I wasn't going to eat it. I wasn't killing it. And it was so beautiful. And she was so fresh. She had like just been hit. It must have happened like that night. And I felt, the only way I can describe it is that the goddess, or I felt God, I felt the Holy Spirit come into my body and animate me. And it turned me around a roundabout. So I went back the way I came, and then around another roundabout to come back where I just come from. And I pulled over, and I shone my headlights, and it was a gray fox with that big, long black stripe from the tip of their nose to the tip of their tail. And I was like screaming in my head. I was like, this is gross. I don't want to do this. And the goddess was like, this is sacred. And I was like, okay. And I picked up the fox and put it into my mom's car, which she found the next morning, because I totally forgot that it had even happened. It was so powerful and such a transcendent moment that I kind of forgot that I'd even left the fox in the back of my mom's car.
Oh my God.
And then I asked a bunch of people. Most of them would not help me, my dad included, who's a big hunter. He was like, no, my taxidermist says that foxes they're going to smell. They have a weird scent glands. You don't want to mess with this. Just like put it back where you found it. And I just was like, no, I don't want to do that. And I asked him, I was like, well, which knife, if I was going to do it, which knife? And he was like, this is a fillet knife, use this. And he handed me the knife. And yeah, the moment that I made the first cut into her neck and not a drop of blood spilled, and her skin started to just peel off of her perfect musculature, just like so perfect, so strong, so lithe, so yeah, flexible, and her skin just started to peel off. And I didn't realize that animals, they don't have like layers of dermis the way that we do and all the fat, and like it's not like that. It just peels off. And so I started just peeling off her skin, and I used this sharp knife and my bare hands, and little by little I would open the skin and slice the fascia, and open the skin and slice the fascia. And I
Wow.
got her whole pelt off of her, in like not very long, like 30 minutes maybe. And it was, the word remembering means to put back together again. Like our member, our arms, our legs, it's like to remember, to put ourselves back together. And that's what it felt like. The same as like fixing that little hole in my cashmere sweats. It's like, these are things we always knew how to do because we had to know how to do them. You couldn't just order a new pair of pants immediately. It took a while for somebody to make those. And so you held on to them. That's why moms would like fix your socks over and over and over again, because it was like, yeah, we have to wait to shear the sheep again, to then like card the wool, to then we spin the thread and then make the thread into the socks that like someone has to do by hand with the little needles, and the what do you call it with the, when you do the needles like this, knitting,
Knitting.
like
Yeah.
you had to knit
Yeah.
the socks. And so I remembered, I remembered in my cells, it wasn't like, oh, a specific past life memory. It's like, this is something that women and men and human beings have done since the beginning of our species and consciousness. And my cells remembered how to do it, and my spirit remembered how to do it. And it was one of the most beautiful, magical experiences of my entire life. And it actually really set a blaze in my community, where then everybody was like, because it was an initiation for sure. It was and that's who I've received most of my initiations from, is directly from nature. She's like, I need you to do this. I'm like, okay, great, let's go. And so many people in my community were like, oh shit, I want to do that now. And people were
Oh,
calling it in. Like everybody was like, okay, I want to find something. And one of my friends, like a
oh
few
my
months
gosh.
later, he was asking me, and he was like, I want to find a coyote. I want to find a coyote. And then he found one, and he messaged me as soon as he did. And I told him what to do, and he did it. And they did a whole beautiful ceremony, and he still got that pelt, and it is just something primal, and it's something that is in our original essence, especially to honor an animal that's died by modern technology, like getting hit by a car. We'd
Right.
never hunted. I mean, in Scotland and England, that's why there's not enough foxes left, because they hunted foxes for fun, and it was just for sport. But you never hunted, like we didn't really hunt predator animals for food, like in the Maasai tribes in Kenya. Like in order to be a warrior, you had to kill a lion, but that was more to like show your power and that you were capable of
Right.
besting the beast that was the top dog or cat in this case, in that location, in that environment. And so we didn't used to kill those kinds of creatures. And I think it's so important for all of us to just remember the reverence with which we used to relate to life and animals. And I left her muscles like just outside of my dad's yard, and I went back and found all of her bones 3 months later, and it was so amazing, and it was such a beautiful process, and something that I will hold sacred for my whole life. And now I still, like, I tried to pick up a raccoon the other day, but it was its summer coat, and so it was like really didn't have a lot of fur. And like everything, I'm always on keeping an eye out for roadkill,
Oh
because
my gosh.
because
Mia.
it's so beautiful to have something like that. People pay for like cow skin rugs and sheepskins and antlers, and like, we put these as decor in our house, and we put them as decor in our house because that used to be the only decor that you had. That used to be
Right.
the only jacket that you had. That was the only shoes that you had. That was the only bed that you had. And that funny comedian that did that skit about like, oh, I went to go, decorate my apartment and people told me what I should do. It's like, oh, you should make it cozy, get some plants. Okay, so I need to bring the things from outside inside. And then, okay, now you get some art. And okay, I'm going to get some art and I'm going to get landscapes of like rivers and mountains and things that are outside. And I'm going to bring them inside. Like, why do we live inside? Shouldn't we just live outside, you know? And it's how we lived for hundreds of thousands of years. And so I think that anything that can help us return to that original essence and remember our inherent oneness with nature is really helpful. And those have been the most powerful practices and experiences and growth moments of my life.
Wow, love it. Can we end on I know your favorite word is divine.
Mm-hmm.
And when I learned from you alone and the meanings of like lunatic or hysteric, I mean, all these words that you bring up in your book, will you kind of put a little spin on that for people?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question to end on. I think one of the important things for us all as we awaken spiritually is to understand that, again, it's all us, it's all our hologram, but in our hologram, the game that we have played with ourselves is that the systems are here to disempower us or convince us of something other than our own divinity. And so the language that we have used and that the projection of the patriarchy has perpetuated in our modern world is that things like lunatic, like the luna is to be connected to the moon, and women inherently with our blood and our menstrual cycles are connected to the moon. We are meant to bleed on the new moon and ovulate on the full moon, and we would ovulate on the full moon because that was the time when it's light outside, so you could be out and about making love, you know, and you could actually see what's going on outside of just your firelight. I love to do full moon hikes. That's one of my favorite things to do, is like I love to hike in the moonlight. Or, you
With
know,
your cat. With
yeah.
your
Well,
cat.
no, we don't. No nighttime hikes. That's too
Okay.
risky. That's like, they would
Okay.
be like, no, on the full moons, they always are trying to get out of the house on full moons. No, they're stuck inside because I don't want them doing whatever kind of crazy ideas they've got going on. But you know, in Kauai, I was in Kauai for the Scorpio full moon, this last one. And we went and swam in the ocean and did like a beautiful womb clearing beneath the earth and, sang at the base of a mountain. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But the word lunatic implies being crazy, same as insane. In Latin means internal, and sane means health. So like to be internally healthy, to actually know what is true and what's right and what's good rather than not, like that is something so beautiful and that is important. And yet we've been taught that to be insane is like crazy and bad. And so there are so many words that, we have just all agreed upon their negative connotation when in fact it's a positive connotation and a good meaning. And it's just important, I think, that's why I make up my own words so often, is I'm like, well, I want to make this mean what I want it to mean,
Right. I love it.
and I'm going to spell it the way that I want to spell it so that it means what I want it to mean. And it's just so important because we are casting spells. And one of my favorites is word. And the origin of the word comes from W-Y-R-D, pronounced weird, and it became word and weird. It's the same origin. It meant destiny, because the weird people are the ones who are moving in the direction of their fate or destiny. They're not just going along with the flock. And we are creating our destinies with every word we speak. And that is certainly something that I know I have done in both good and bad ways.
Mm-hmm.
There have been a lot of moments. There were a lot of moments in the beginning of my partnership where I would like complain about him, about something to one of my friends. And like those things came to be. They came to fruition. And I have also spoken so highly and like been, oh my God, like had these amazing, I've never had such a faithful, loyal, incredible, amazing man. And that's what I got. Like he was loyal till the bitter end, and faithful. And I had never believed that a man could be like that. And so every single word that we are speaking and that we are communicating and that we are expressing is weaving the fabric of our destiny. And it's very important for us all to just know what we're saying and know what we are creating with the spells that we cast. That's why we call it spelling.
Right. I love that. I'm going to Crete. I heard you talking about Crete, and I'm going to Crete next. I know. And I was sharing you with somebody and I said, and I'm going to Crete. And, but so there's something there that I need to go to, right?
Oh yes, definitely. I don't know if I want to like blast it on the whole podcast because it's a very sacred, small,
Okay. We can talk
beautiful
about it
place.
after.
But in general, Hania is the little town that I went to, where I stayed, and I can hook you up with my boy Manolis, who's like has grew up there, knows every secret beach, and I mean, like, there's some secret places on that island that nobody knows about
Huh.
that you can only get to because he knows the olive oil farmer of this guy's cousin that, like, and so there's some incredible beauty, and it's the biggest island in the Mediterranean, and it has waterfalls and rivers and canyons, because it's not just like Ibiza or Mallorca that's like small and super arid. It's really, I mean, it has the same climate obviously, but it's so lush. It's so much more lush than anywhere else in the Mediterranean, besides like some of mainland Italy, and it's so incredible. So
You
yes,
made me
I
so excited.
it's my favorite place on earth, probably. I love it so much, and the food and the people, and I always feel safe there. Like, it's just the best.
Oh, I'm excited. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so
So
welcome.
what's on the horizon? You have your retreats. Where
Yes, my
can
retreats
people,
are
yeah.
coming up August and October, castles and redwoods. So my retreats are on the horizon. There's so many amazing things on the horizon. We have an at-home rage ritual that we're doing so that people can join and experience a rage ritual, because I know everybody's needing it. It's such a hot topic right now. There's so many things. Yeah, my second book is out in a while. My Oracle deck's coming out, but my first book, IntuWitchin, is available where all books are sold everywhere, and everything, my YouTube, Instagram, website, TikTok, all of it is Mia Magik, Miamagik. So everybody can find me there. Magic with a K, Magik. And so yeah, it's just all the magic all the time. Every little bit of uncovering your magic is
Yeah.
available.
I
Yeah.
love it. What does it feel like to have that book out? Now that I've listened to it for the entirety, what does that make you feel like when you have a book out there? Does it what is that feeling?
It feels great. It's just the beginning, I think, really. Like, my career was leading up to that point, and honestly, I really wanted I really wanted to share that and have kind of the credibility and the place where so much knowledge and wisdom and so many of my stories is in one, like, you can experience it in this one dose, and it feels great. It feels really amazing to be able to say I'm a best-selling author. That's pretty cool. And it was funny, you talked about the New York thing. This is like the last little tidbit, and I was going to say this before when you were talking about the journey, but I lost the train of thought. And you were talking about that New York Mia, and I went back for my book tour, and I got to think about that New York Mia versus this New York Mia. And I did this incredible meditation where I just remembered all the moments where I was so sad and so shut down and so lonely and so like, what the fuck am I doing with my life? And I went back and went to those street corners and those walks and those nights and those moments, and I showed her up to her in my full witch regalia and was able to tell her who she'd become and what she
Uh,
had accomplished and how her life had changed and what beauty she had created from that darkness and sadness. And it was such an incredible gift. It was such a joy. It was such a blessing. And I, yeah, I feel so grateful that I have followed the thread of my destiny and that I have followed my inner child's deepest dreams and fantasies and made them into my reality. And that book, is one of 4 projects that I got with Hay House that are coming out over the next 2 years. And again, it feels like just the beginning.
Amazing. What advice would you give that 5-year-old girl that just came into my mind that you told your mom, I'm going to live here one day when you were in New York?
Oh
What
my goddess. I would just tell her, like, the thing is, girl, keep pursuing what you love. Don't listen to anyone else. Don't stop doing the things that there's going to come a moment in 2 years or 3 years where your dad's going to say something. Keep singing, girl. Keep singing, keep dancing, keep doing all your weird musical theater and all the stuff that you're into. And of course, that would have led me down a totally different trajectory. But I wish that she had, well, I mean, I can't wish because it's all exactly as it was supposed to be, but I would just keep telling her to be herself and to do what she loved and to never, ever stop believing in magic. And that's something that I say to every little kid that I meet nowadays. Hey, come here, I have to tell you something. They're like, okay, what? I'm like, there's going to come a time. I was like, you believe in magic, right? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, fairies and unicorns are real, right? They're like, yeah, totally. I'm like, okay, well, there's going to come a time where everybody else around you is going to try and tell you that they're not real and that magic isn't real. And I want to tell you right now, it's because they just don't know. They forgot, they can't remember, they don't know where to find it, but they have no idea. They're wrong. Trust me. So promise me right now, pinky swear, that you will always believe in magic. And when that time comes, you're going to think about this moment right now. And you're going to be like, I met a witch and she told me magic was real. And I'm not going to believe all of you. Like, I'm going to keep believing in magic. And they always say, okay, I promise, and it's like, I say that to every little kid that I can get a hold of.
Do you want to be a mom? Do you want to have kids one day?
Yeah, eventually. Yeah. My mom had me when she was 40 and my brother when she was 43. So I feel like I have a lot of time.
Yeah.
I'm not like really in a rush.
Right. Oh gosh. But I'm that way with my girls, their whole life. It's been magic moments and every little thing is magic.
Yeah.
And that's why I resonate with you so much. So, thank you, Mia. That was so fun. I was looking so forward to it. And I just really, if I could say anything about this book, I know your soul and I feel you and I got like this, I've learned so much. I love your journey it's just going to be like for people that read that book or I love listening to it because the way you speak and your emotions in it. And
it's so fun to read it myself.
Get to know you that way.
Yeah.
But anyone listening, I would get this book. It really changed my last few days. And I will go out on my walks now because it's over and I'll have to work on my next podcast. But I will not look at my trees the same. I will not look at the grass, the birds because of you. And the owls that I always look to and stop and talk to because I think they're my dad. That's how I associate the hummingbirds. But every little thing that secondhand things, the farmer's market, you've really you've made an impact on me. So think if I'm just one person, think of what you're doing for the whole collective. It's amazing. Your magic.
Thank you, Queen. I appreciate that so much. That's why I'm doing it. I've been having this really with this uncoupling process and feeling what the next iteration of love looks like for me. I keep seeing this, makes me emotional. I keep seeing this image of this big warrior man, taking off, undoing the fastens of my armor and pulling up the chainmail shirt from me. And this feeling of every day I am a crusader for the feminine, and there is someone who can hold the depths of that mission in a way that I can't even conceptualize of right now. And it's so beautiful because it's a big path to walk. It's a hard path to walk, and the goddess chose me for it. And I'm here and I'm not ever going to give up. I am so devoted to it, but it's a really big weight to carry. So that's all I want, is for it to positively impact people and for people to be inspired and for people to change their habits and change their choices and change the way that they relate to themselves and each other and our beautiful, sacred, holy, living planet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. Amen. Hallelujah.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, love. I really appreciate it.